สวัสดีค่ะ Very good evening and welcome to Thai PBS World Tonight. I'm Nabunag.
And I'm Hatay Shekitiran. Good evening. And kickstarting the program tonight with what you all may have been quite frustrated about last night, which is the outage of Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. So hashtags about the outage of Facebook and Instagram last night were top trending on Twitter in Thailand shortly after the social media giant became inaccessible. Frustrated Thai netizens reportedly flocked to Twitter to report the outage of Facebook, Instagram, and the Messenger app. According to one, the disruption started at 10:30 p.m. Thai time. Others tweeted that the outage had nothing to do with connectivity. About an hour after going offline, Facebook issued an apology for the disruption and said that they were trying to fix the problem, according to some expert, which was attributed to its domain name system or DNS. And some Facebook users said that the outage affected several businesses which rely on the global social media platform. According to Thailand Digital Stat, there were 51 million Facebook users in Thailand. That was the stat from 2 years ago, with more women than men using, making Thailand one of the world's top 10 Facebook using nations among about 2.3 billion accounts globally. And this year, however, YouTube users in Thailand have surpassed Facebook's because of the music available on the platform. This was, of course, a global phenomenon and we were all affected. But it's quite interesting, Kanad, to note that there are hardly any mentionings of WhatsApp outage because not many Thais are using the app. It's all about Line in Thailand.
Exactly. Line, Facebook, and TikTok are among the top apps among Thai people. Although Facebook is being used by much fewer youngsters now, leaving the platform for older people like us and even our parents. And it's really funny how when the Facebook and Instagram were down and many took to Twitter saying that Twitter has pretty much survived the outage.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And moving on, it has been a month and a half since the chilling killer cop case came into light thanks to a leaked video about the issue. And police said in early September that a police investigation may have concluded by the end of last month, but that hasn't really happened yet. But at least there has been some more progress to the case. The dismissed former police superintendent in Nakhon Sawan province, Police Colonel Titisan Uttanapon, had been involved in the seizure of 410 luxurious cars smuggled through into Thailand from Singapore and Malaysia during his service, with 270 of them reported to have been stolen abroad. And this is according to the Deputy National Police Chief, Police General Suchat Thirasawat. Titisan, also known as Joe Ferrari, and his subordinates at Nakhon Sawan's Mueang District Police Station are accused of torturing a drug suspect in their custody to death by covering his face with several layers of plastic bags. All are currently on remand pending the outcome of the investigation. Citing a report into Titisan's involvement in the seizure of the cars and suspected money laundering, Police General Suchat said it was discovered that 101 of the smuggled cars were reported to have been stolen abroad before they were seized in Thailand, and 169 were reported stolen after their seizure, leaving 140 cars, their provenance of which is still being investigated. The police deputy chief said the fact that several cars were seized before they were smuggled into southern Thailand was a clear indication that the seizures were illegal. He also added that several of the cars were brought into Thailand by foreigners who immediately flew back to their countries. He said that he has ordered the immigration police to find out how many cars were brought into Thailand using this trick. Out of all the 410 cars seized by Titisan and the other officers, all but 5 have been auctioned off by the Customs Department.
And according to the official report, police who seize smuggled vehicles can claim a reward from the Customs Department. When the seized cars were put up for auction by the Customs Department, men closely linked with Titisan would bid for them and then sell them on to people with a penchant for expensive cars available at below market prices. And regarding the death of the suspect while in custody, the police general Sushant said the investigation is now 90% complete. So it's not 100% yet, it's almost there, and that he expects that the case to be wrapped up in November for forwarding to the public prosecutors.
Well, we can say that probably the chilling cop case that caused much public interest has helped shed more light onto the sports car smuggling case as well.
Right, exactly. The case has shed the light not only on rampant police brutality and drug cases, as we already discussed before, but also corruption. So I have a question for our viewers. Do you think we'll see the case through with justice served, or will it just end up in smoke with people having forgotten about it later? So do share your views with us in the comment section. Turning to politics, quite a big development happened today, as well as the civil court has accepted a lawsuit filed against Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha and 5 others, which was filed jointly by the anti-establishment Rasadon Group, the Internet Law Reform Dialogue, or ILAW, a non-profit legal organization, that is, and a feminist group demanding the lifting of restrictions on free expressions and 4.5 million baht in compensation. So ILAW is represented by Yingship Ashannon, while the Rasidon and feminist liberation groups are represented by Attapon Buapat and Shumapon Tangpliang, respectively. In the lawsuit, the plaintiffs claim that they were charged by the police for addressing a protest held by the United Front of Thammasat and demonstration on March the 24th in violation of restrictions stipulated in the emergency decree, and argue that these restrictions impinge upon their constitutional right to freedom of expression. Yingship, meanwhile, said that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the state could impose certain restrictions to contain the spread of the virus, of course, but could not restrict free political expression, adding that the venues of the protests are normally open air and are not so vulnerable to the spread of the disease. He also said that he would like the civil court to revoke the restrictions retroactively, meaning that all charges related to the emergency decree and criminal code filed against the protesters will be dropped automatically. And this ILAW manager also disclosed that his previous lawsuits filed with the civil court demanding the revocation of the emergency decree had been dismissed on the grounds that they had no merit, adding that the court should have consider the legitimacy of the decree in its deliberations.
Meanwhile, Sanya Iezhongli, a lawyer of the group, said the plaintiffs will ask the court to issue a temporary injunction to suspend the enforcement of the decree and associated restrictions. So we can see that many of the protesters don't really agree of the continuous extension of the state of emergency.
It's actually been since March 2020, so a year and a half already, that the state of emergency has been repeatedly extended, and also certain critics of the government, for example, the group of people who actually filed the lawsuit in the courts, would even some journalists would also file such complaint that the freedom of expression actually is quite a separate issue from the need to control and contain the pandemic.
Of course, with the extension of the state of emergency, even though the government said is to control the spread of COVID-19, many groups, including journalists, the protesters, and those who disagree with the state of emergency, they believe that it's more of a restriction from people coming out to do public assemblies, no matter what subject it is.
Right.
Right, and now let's move on to something a bit lighter. Thailand's annual vegetarian festival kicked off yesterday in many provinces across the country with measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19 in place and without the usual fanfare. The festival, which takes place each year in the ninth lunar month, is culturally significant, particularly among the Chinese community in southern provinces like Phuket. The island is famous for its street procession, which includes rituals of devotees self-inflicting pain, either to demonstrate divine power or as a sacrifice, taking on the sins of the community. The event, which is usually attended by thousands of people, will still be held this year amid the pandemic, but this time it will exclude the pain infliction ritual to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Shrines around the island also announced the mandating of masks and gloves and requiring ATK negative test results for the shrine staff. The festival this year officially takes place from October 6th to the 14th, according to the Chinese lunar calendar. However, in many places, including Phuket, the rituals began on October 5th as shrines and believers started performing the pole-raising ritual, which is believed to summon divinities to the earth. During the 9-day event, believers will refrain from eating meat and sexual activity in a bid to cleanse their souls and accumulate merits.
But this year, people in Phuket might be affected to some extent by the floods around the country, which usually result in the surge of vegetable prices. And in some places, the entire festival might just be banned completely. In Udon Thani, for example, there is a Dhamma club that has announced that they will skip the vegetarian festival this year. The alms house as well as the canteen will be unavailable to prevent the spread of COVID-19.
And even though some of the public celebrations are canceled for this year in some of the provinces, on the good side, we can still enjoy some home-cooked vegetarian food at home. But the only problem, though, is the price increase of the vegetables at this time, which is heavily affected by the floods.
Right. So I think it's a matter of picking, choosing whatever that there is left at the supermarkets and markets. And since everyone, even me, has been cooking a lot since last year, we can also try new vegetarian or vegan dishes ourselves too. And speaking of vegan, Kanad, actually the festival should have been called Vegan Festival because it really is vegan in Thai language. It is now known by anyone as the Vegetarian Festival, unfortunately. So I guess we'll have to go with it.
And one thing though, with the word vegan is like ginje, and vegetarian is more in Thai we call mangsawira. So there are two completely different meanings. So maybe it's better if we call vegan festival, but if it's known as vegetarian festival, yeah, like you just said, we just have to go by that name.
And still on the annual Vegetarian Festival, many financial institutes predict that they will not see as much spending as usual, even though the COVID situation is actually improving. So the Kasikorn Research Center predicts that this year's annual Vegetarian Festival will generate 3.6 billion baht in spending between October 6th and 14th, which is an 8.2% decrease from last year. And although the situation of the pandemic is improving with more access to vaccinations, the flooding and rising energy prices have still affected consumer spending. And other factors include the decreasing number of people eating a vegetarian diet during the festival, particularly office workers who are still working from home and who would have to venture outside to buy street vegetarian food. But more people are likely to purchase through online delivery channels now, which provide more convenience and a variety. So Kasikorn Research Center also predicts that the vegan food market will increase not only during the annual vegetarian festival, as people consume healthier food now.
And meanwhile, the Thai Chamber of Commerce forecasts that this year's vegetarian festival will generate 40 billion baht between October 4th and 13th, which is a 14.5% decrease from last year. The main factors are the COVID-19 pandemic as well as the flooding situation. The rector of the Thai Chamber of Commerce, Thanawat Phonvichai, also suggested that the Thai economy will improve and fully recover by mid-2022, but the public sector borrowing will continue to increase. He also believes that the economy will recover after the government eases more lockdown measures, which will encourage people to spend more.
Right. So obviously, COVID has changed a lot of things, our lifestyle, and a lot of people's income and livelihood even. So of course, for those who can still afford it, do enjoy this year's the festival.
Exactly. And even though we don't have public celebrations, we can still enjoy celebrating them at home.
Right. Now, a Zoom thing is a thing, or how do I put it? Even happy hours through Zoom is also a thing.
Exactly.
Nothing is impossible. So with that, we wrap up this edition of Thai PBS World tonight. But do catch us like this every weekday at 7 p.m. for all the top stories and explainers.
And don't forget to follow us on social media as well as our website, thaipbsworld.com, for all the latest updates about Thailand as well as analyses. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and we'll see you tomorrow. สวัสดีค่ะ
สวัสดีค่ะ